What's up, guys? In today's video, we're going to talk about tips for tracking macros and eating out. This week's Fan Friday comes to us from Samantha Mabe, and her question is, what are some tips for eating out and tracking macros? Great question, Sam. Let's get into it. Eating out, while especially in contest prep, can stress out even the most experienced competitor. And for those of us who are tracking in their off seasons, it can still bring a little bit of stress when trying to find meals that fit your macros, no matter where they're at. So I'm going to go over some tips to help you track and find foods that you can eat while at any restaurant. So I'll start off with the most important factor, and obviously that's knowing where your current macronutrients are at. That you have to always take into consideration before you go out to eat. So if you know you're going out to eat, and my wife and I just went out to eat the other day to Longhorn Steakhouse, I knew what I was pretty much going to get based off of my own macronutrient intake. That, and I've eaten there before, so I know pretty much what to order. But the first thing that you have to know is where are your macros and how much room do you have. So taking that knowledge, going into a restaurant, you can make an informed decision. So it's all about making informed decisions along the way. Once you know how much room you have with your macros, then you could start to looking at food options. But before even you go to a specific restaurant, there are certain restaurants that you can avoid, and there are certain restaurants that you can go to. So some restaurants to avoid, in my opinion, and now most of the people that are probably watching these videos are probably dieting to a certain extent. So there are certain restaurants that are really dense, in my opinion. Some restaurants would be like Five Guys or any kind of like burger joint, so like In-N-Out Burger if you're, I think that's like more like on the West Coast or in the South. We have like Five Guys up here. So that's a very dense place where you're going to absolutely struggle to find anything that really is going to fit your macros. Sure, you could get like one patty, but that's going to be super high in fat. Other restaurants potentially to avoid might be like things like Olive Garden even, things that have like a lot of carbs in it and that have like a lot of fat that's kind of like mixed in with everything. I tend to go to restaurants where they have a little bit more simple food and or chain restaurants. So if you go to a chain restaurant, and I know that, you know, Five Guys and Olive Garden are obviously chain restaurants, but you have to, if you really want to know how much is exactly in your food, you can go to a chain restaurant. Any large chain restaurant is going to have their macronutrients and their nutrition facts listed on their website. So that's the first place you go before you even go to the restaurant to make a pre-planned decision on what you could potentially get. If you see something on the menu that you could potentially get, awesome. If you don't, then you have to go to the next place. If you don't go to a chain restaurant, so that's another hurdle that you have to jump over. Now, most restaurants, let's say for instance there's a local restaurant that we go to called The Lighthouse, which is a little bit more upscale restaurant in Northwest Indiana where I live here, and they have chefs. Right? Any restaurant that's going to have a chef is going to be able to make you something to your liking. That's their job. So you can go there and you can ask for a plain chicken breast just with seasoning on it and a plain baked potato and plain vegetables steamed a certain way if you like it. And you could tell them exactly how you want it prepared because that's their job to make the customer happy. So when going to a non-chain restaurant where they have like a chef that's making food, you could always ask for your food dry. So that's cooked without butter or oil. You could ask for your vegetables steamed. You could ask for steamed rice. You could ask for a baked potato with nothing on it. That's typically what I do. Now, that's like in the depths of contest prep that you could really do that. And of course, you could always take your scale with you at a restaurant like that. I've done it before when I've been in contest prep, and I've physically weighed out my portions just to make sure that I know exactly what I'm putting in. You don't necessarily have to go as far as that goes, but I would recommend it, especially if you are in contest prep. So when planning to go out to eat, the first step is always, knowing where your macros are. The second step is looking at the food menu to see what potentially meets your macronutrients. And I'm just going to name a couple of restaurants that I've gone to in the past that I feel like I could fit in my numbers pretty well. And you could always change things on the menu to help fit your macros. Now, things like Chipotle I've gone to in the past. Well, although I don't necessarily weigh out everything, that's something I more or less go to like in an off season. I eat at Chick-fil-A fairly frequently. So you could just get a plain chicken breast sandwich there. It's very tasty. They're always very good. So those are the two that I pretty much stick to the most. But even things you could find, I've eaten at McDonald's, I've eaten at Burger King, I've eaten at KFC, things like that. You could still find things on every single menu, more or less, that you could fit your macros in a pinch. Now, usually I don't like to waste my money on just like a plain chicken breast sandwich from any kind of restaurant, because I can make that for myself at my house. But in a pinch, if I'm out and about and I don't have food on me, that's what I usually sway to. I know it's kind of boring, but boring can be good if it helps you stick to your diet. So these are the things that I pretty predominantly look for when I'm going out to a restaurant. And you could always default back, once again, to some kind of plain chicken breast and or plain steak. It may not be the most appetizing thing in the world, but if it helps you stick to your numbers, that's what's most important. And I will say this one last thing. It's not necessarily directly involved in this week's question, but I did want to mention it. So obviously a lot of us gather around food, whether it's a holiday or just going out with family, friends, your wife, like I did the other day. And the most important thing to remember is when we go out around food is to remember that it's the people around us that matter. It's not necessarily the food. So that's what I really try to think about, especially when I'm in contest prep. It's really not the food that I'm eating that's the most important to me. It's the people that are around me. So don't feel like you have to completely avoid going out to eat, if you're dieting or if you're in contest prep. You could still eat responsibly and enjoy everyone's company. So you don't need to completely forego going out to eat if you're in a contest prep. Last year, many of you know I dieted, or I was in a contest prep phase for like 50 weeks, so almost an entire year. So I can't avoid eating out at a restaurant for an entire year, going through everyone's birthday, going through all the holidays that come up, going through going on a vacation. Like, you're eventually going to have to eat out. So you have to use these tools in order to help you kind of navigate and make informed decisions when you go to these restaurants. And I don't necessarily encourage people, if you're really poor at guesstimating, to go out to eat to restaurants, especially if there is no set nutrition facts. So if you don't really know what's in the food and you have a hard time guesstimating what's in the food, then yeah, I might recommend that you go more towards a chain restaurant where they have their macronutrients listed. But if you're comfortable with guesstimating, if you're pretty good at guesstimating your intake, then yeah, you can absolutely go ahead and go to a restaurant and eat out and enjoy everyone's company. Now, there is a certain point in time during contest prep, maybe about like 4 or 6 weeks out, that I usually recommend that people pretty much dial it back in and they really control what they eat. As long as their weight loss has been good, though, you can still get away with it. If your weight loss starts to stall, that's when I would say, okay, maybe we shouldn't be going out to eat anymore. Maybe we shouldn't be guesstimating our intake. We need to really hone things in. So that's it for today's Fan Friday, guys. Great question as always. Keep dominating every aspect. I'll see you soon.